Hi, I am Nejat Doğan from the Department of International Relations at Anadolu University. Welcome to our class today, and the topic of this video is the historical evolution of the international system. However, rather than going into detail about the history of international system, I would just touch on some critical points, and I would suggest you to go to your book and read the whole chapter. But I will, as I said, touch on some critical concepts. Let's look at the chapter outline first of all. The chapter starts with the emergence of the modern system, and it goes on to give you detail about the 17th and 18th centuries, talks about the French Revolution and Napoleonic Wars, and the international system in the 19th century, and the international system in the 20th century. And it closes with the post-Cold War system. Now, what is a system? What's an international system? The book gives you a definition of system as the system is either a whole or a network consisting of multiple units that interact within the framework of defined rules. Then there are some crucial concepts in the system. First of all, there must be some units and actors, and they must be independent and political units, and they should interact at the international level. And these interactions occur, in fact, within the framework of defined rules. Then the book talks about the Westphalian System. In fact, the Peace of Westphalia, signed in 1648, ended the 30 Years' War, and it marked the emergence of some basic systemic principles such as territoriality, sovereignty, legal equality, and non-interference in domestic affairs. Then our book talks about the main characteristics of this Westphalian system. There are two main characteristics. First is the vertical relationship. Second is the horizontal relationship. The vertical relationship, in fact, is between the big states and smaller states. The horizontal relationship is the relationship between the big or the great powers. Then the book talks about the main characteristics of the 17th and 18th centuries. These are the centuries for big monarchies in the heart of Europe. And these monarchies, in fact, controlled the international system and defined its workings. And the chapter then goes on to detail about the French Revolution, French Revolutionary Wars, and the Napoleonic Wars in the late 18th century and early 19th century. The French Revolution, in fact, was a major blow to the Westphalian system because it undermined the political homogeneity of states of the 17th and 18th centuries. French Revolutionary Wars were waged in late 18th century. However, the main aim of France in these years was still to integrate France into the international system. However, the story totally changed with Napoleon and with the Napoleonic Wars because Napoleon tried to establish French dominance in the heart of Europe. And you would read in your chapter the challenges by the Napoleonic Wars to the international system. However, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, and the Congress of Vienna defined a totally new working of the international system. As you might see in the video, then there are some main characteristics of this system, which we call, in fact, the concert of Europe. What is the concert? The concert was the good relations among major monarchies in the heart of Europe, such as Austria, Britain, Prussia, and Russia. They created a new pattern of diplomacy, at least until 1850s, and it's called Congress diplomacy. The Metternich system between 1815 and 1848 defined the workings of this Congress diplomacy. However, this ended with the Crimean War, because the Crimean War, in fact, was a major blow to this good relations among and between the monarchies. Then we see the rise of Germany in the heart of Europe, which we would later call the German problem or Germany problem. It was the birth of a very powerful Germany in Europe, and it was also a threat to the European system in late 19th century as well as the 20th century. But the Bismarckian system had major weaknesses, and this brings us to the story of World War I. World War I started in 1914 as a European conflict. However, it turned out to be a world war with the U.S. intervention. At the peace conference, the big powers created the League of Nations, so you can say the early 20th century is also the system of the League of Nations. However, we had some very serious problems in the system in the early 1920s, such as the world crash, the stock exchange crash. I would mean the New York Stock Exchange crash in 1929 and the Great Depression. These problems, in fact, paved the way for the rise of fascism in Italy and Germany. Italy attacked Poland in September 1939, and Second World War started. The Second World War ended with the surrendering of Germany and Japan in 1945, and the big powers this time defined the new universal international organization, which is the United Nations. However, the Cold War started very early, I would say, even during the Second World War, and this was an ideological division of Europe between Eastern and Western pacts, between Eastern and Western blocs. And on the one side, you know, is under the leadership of the United States, we see the West, and under the leadership of Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc. And Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan, in fact, defined this Western bloc in late 1940s. And the NATO created in 1949. And Soviets reciprocated with the Warsaw Pact. And there were some major developments during the Cold War. I would suggest you go and read your chapter, the details about the Cold War. But I here listed some critical developments, such as the emergence of the non-aligned movement in mid-1950s, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, and the starting of a detente area with the Cuban crisis, and West Germany's launch of Ostpolitik, which is the Eastpolitik with Willy Brandt. And there were some also good news during the Cold War, such as the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, which was signed in 1972, as well as the Helsinki Final Act was signed in 1975. And we see the rise of Gorbachev in 1985 as the leader of Soviet Union, and he defined perestroika and glasnost policies, which would herald the end of the Cold War. And let's look at the post-Cold War system in the early 1990s, and your chapter defines the developments in early 1990s, such as German reunification and the fall of the Berlin Wall, as well as the fall of the Soviet Union. However, the story of the 21st century is totally different, especially the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the United States opens up a new chapter in the history of international system. This was a war on terror, a global war on terror, I would say, started in the early 21st century. But if you look at today's international politics, we see that the United Nations efforts are still important for peace, but most of all, the states' intentions matter. And this summarizes our video, wraps up our video for today. And in the next video, we will be talking about some basic theories of international relations. I hope you join me in that video. Until then, you take care. Bye.